She was officially charged with murdering all four of her children, and if she was found guilty, she would be known as the worst female serial killer in Australia. Hi everyone, welcome back to All Things Jira, and I'm back with another story. This story is about Kathleen Folbigg, and she's known as Australia's most hated woman. Before I get into the story, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment below. Kathleen was born as Kathleen Donovan on June 14, 1967 in Australia. Her father's name was Thomas Britton, and her mother's name was also Kathleen Donovan. Now, Thomas and Kathleen liked to drink. They were alcoholics, they drank all the time, and they argued all the time. On January 8, 1969, Kathleen's parents were drunk and they got into an argument. During this argument, Kathleen's mom left. She left the home. Thomas went after her, and when he caught up with her, he begged her to come back to the house, and when she refused, he stabbed her 24 times. So Kathleen's father murdered her mother, and Kathleen was put into foster care at about 3 years old. She had a temporary foster family, and then she was eventually put into a children's group home. From there, she was placed into a permanent foster family. This family already had one daughter. So they said she was very loved in their home. She was the center of attention until they had a son. I'm not sure how much the dynamic changed. They didn't really go into too much detail, but she just wasn't the center of attention anymore. Now, they decided to tell Kathleen that she was adopted on her 16th birthday, and this really devastated her. She went to school the next day and told her friends, what she had learned on her birthday, and she was really upset about this. She eventually graduated. I believe it said she graduated at 17, and she met a young man named Craig. Now, at this point in her life, Kathleen said that she believed she was put on this planet to meet a man, get married, and have babies, and just become a mother. That was what she was put here for. So Kathleen and Craig Folbigg got married. Their first son, Caleb, was born on February 1st, 1989. But sadly, Caleb only lived 19 days. Kathleen said she went in to check on him while he was taking a nap, and he was limp and lifeless. She called an ambulance, and they came, but they were unable to resuscitate him. Now, Caleb's cause of death was declared as SIDS. Now, SIDS is sudden infant death syndrome, and it's also called cot death. SIDS is the sudden death of an infant under the age of 1 year old. It's said to be very rare. It most often happens between the ages of 1 month old and 4 months old, and it's more common in boys. Now, studies have shown that if a baby has siblings or cousins that have died from SIDS, they're at a higher risk. So we know now way more than we did before, back in the 80s. At this point, Kathleen and her family thought that, this is something that can only happen once in a family. It's too rare for it to happen again. So they got pregnant again. Their second son, Patrick, was born on June 3rd, 1990. When Patrick was about 4 months old, Kathleen said she went in to check on him and he wasn't breathing. So Craig started CPR while Kathleen called the ambulance. Now, Patrick was revived, but it's unknown how long he had been laying there not breathing. Due to a loss of oxygen, Patrick had severe brain damage, which led to a seizure disorder. About 4 months later, Kathleen put Patrick down for a nap. She went back in to check on him a few moments later and found that he wasn't breathing. They called an ambulance, but unfortunately this time they were unable to resuscitate Patrick. Now, his cause of death was declared as an airway obstruction. And after this, Kathleen gave birth to a daughter, Sarah. Now, I wasn't able to find her birth date. At this point, Kathleen has lost 2 children, so she was very protective over Sarah. She wouldn't allow anyone to watch her if they didn't have CPR training. August of 1993, Sarah was about 10 months old when Kathleen found her lifeless. Kathleen called an ambulance. They came, but they were unable to resuscitate her, and her cause of death was declared SIDS as well. Next, Kathleen gave birth to a daughter, Laura. I couldn't find a birthday for her either. Now, the family was very excited when Laura was born, but they were very scared as well because Kathleen had already lost three children at this point. The family said that Laura had a huge personality for such a small baby, and when she reached her first birthday, they were ecstatic. Kathleen had never had a baby make it to 1 year old at this point, so they were all very excited. They got to really celebrate Laura because she had made it past that SIDS danger zone. So on March 1st, 1999, Craig went to work and Kathleen decided to go to the gym. She took Laura with her. Now, on the way back home from the gym, Laura fell asleep in the car. So Kathleen brings Laura in from the car. She takes her in the house and allows her to continue sleeping. She went back in to check on her about 15 minutes later, and Laura was not breathing. She called an ambulance and started CPR. While she was on the phone with the emergency operator, she was obviously upset. She was panicked while trying to get help for Laura. Now, during the conversation, she let the operator know that she had already lost three children due to SIDS.
Ambulance emergency?
I need an ambulance. My baby's not breathing.
Okay, and how old's your baby?
20 months old. Can you just hold a minute? I'm trying to do CPR.
20 months old.
Not getting any heartbeat or anything.
Okay, do you know why this is?
I've had 3 SIDS tests already.
Pardon?
I've had 3 go already.
And your name?
The ambulance arrived, but they were unable to resuscitate her. About a week prior to Laura's death, they said that she had some type of cold-like illness. During the autopsy, they found that she had myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart muscles, and is typically caused by a viral infection, which could have been that cold-like illness that she had the week prior. Forensic pathologist Dr. Alan Calla, he examined Laura's body. He stated that the myocarditis was not advanced enough for that to be Laura's cause of death. He also stated that because of her age, this could not be SIDS. He could not say 100% that Laura was not suffocated. Her cause of death was listed as undetermined. And at this point, this is the 4th death for Kathleen and Craig. And at this point, Kathleen was under suspicion. Now, the thought among the police department was that Kathleen had done this and she had killed her 4 children, but they were unable to prove it. Now, in the 90s, there was a general thought that one death due to SIDS was a tragedy. The second death was suspicious, and the third death was homicide until it could be proved otherwise. At some point, Craig contacted the police, and he let them know that Kathleen had been overwhelmingly stressed by the children prior to each of their deaths, and he also said that he found one of her diaries, and these diaries had some very cryptic entries in them.
I've handled another like Sarah. She saved her life by being different. And stress made me do terrible things. Got so bad I nearly purposely dropped her on the floor and left her. What scares me most will be when I'm alone with the baby. With Sarah, all I wanted was her to shut up. And one day she did.
From that moment, it was a murder investigation.
From the moment that the police read those entries, this became a murder investigation, and Kathleen was brought in for questioning.
Do you know what sort of person would kill 4 children?
I have no comprehension. I don't even want to think about it.
Kathy, did you kill Caleb?
No!
Did you kill Patrick?
No!
Did you try to kill Patrick on that near-miss episode?
No!
Did you kill Sarah?
No.
She was officially charged with murdering all 4 of her children, and if she was found guilty, she would be known as the worst female serial killer in Australia. Now, the prosecutor put forth the theory that in a moment of uncontrolled anger, Kathleen suffocated her children, and that immediately after she would do this, she would feel extreme guilt and then call the emergency line to try to get them some help. They also stated that they didn't believe that she intended to kill the children, that maybe she was intending to make them unconscious in an effort for them to sleep so they could be quiet, but the children died because of this. Now, one of the most compelling things in this case was that Kathleen's husband was testifying against her and talking about how much stress she was under with the children and how stressed and, overwhelmed she would get with them. Now, the other really damning thing were her diary entries.
She's a fairly good-natured baby. Thank goodness. It has saved her from the fate of her siblings. I think she was warned. I feel like the worst mother on this earth. Scared that she'll leave me now like Sarah did. I knew I was short-tempered and cruel sometimes to her. She left.
Now, Kathleen never testified on her own behalf, so essentially the diary entries testified for her. There was not one piece of specific evidence that showed that Kathleen killed her children, but everything put together just did not look good for Kathleen at all. The prosecutors concentrated on the fact that Kathleen found the first 3 children dead and that she never picked them up. Laura was the only one that she did CPR on herself. A jury of 12 unanimously found Kathleen guilty of murdering all 3 of her children. So she was found guilty of murdering 3 and manslaughter of 1. And she was sentenced to 40 years in prison, eligible for parole in 30 years. The judge on her case noted a lack of grief in Kathleen. So he stated that she would likely never admit to killing her children, no matter what. In 2003, her case was reviewed by several people that stated that some of the evidence that was put forth to the jury, it wasn't fact, it was really opinion-based. I'm going to read this part so I don't get it wrong. It states that all medical witnesses were asked if any medical literature documented whether 3 or more SIDS deaths in a family were considered natural deaths, and they all answered no. Dr. Emma Cunliffe from the University of British Columbia Law School stated that she believes above all the evidence this was the most compelling for the jury, and that at this point there have been more documented cases of this really happening and multiple children in one family dying from SIDS versus at that time where there weren't very many documented cases. Professor Ray Hill, a professor of mathematics, he examined the statistics about infant mortality. Now he stated, multiple cot deaths may be a rare event, so also will be multiple homicide. The statistics show that 2 or 3 cot deaths is no more reason to suppose that they are murder rather than cot deaths. Therapists have said that Kathleen had a very rigid and strict idea of what it took to become a good mother, and because of this, her diary entries were really her just talking about being a failure at being a mother and not a confession to killing her children. And Kathleen agrees with this. There was another case in Australia. Carol Matthew was charged with killing her 4 children as well. They were initially ruled as SIDS deaths, but she was charged with killing her 4 children after the 4th child died. Now, in her case, the exact same medical experts were used, but in her case, the judge threw them out and stated that they were testifying on opinion and not on fact, and Carol was never convicted of killing her children. At this point, Carol is now trying to help Kathleen overturn her conviction. So what do you think about this case? Do you think that Kathleen killed her children, or do you think that they were all SIDS deaths? A lot of the defense asserted that there was some type of genetic mutation in her children, which led them all to be subjected to SIDS or early deaths. So what do you think? Do you think Kathleen actually killed her children? Or what about Carol? Her situation was exactly the same, and she was never convicted, and Kathleen was given 40 years. Let me know what you think in the comments below. That was my story for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to my channel, and share it. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you all next Wednesday.